Life is a use it or lose it proposition. Young people don't see the end of times, but older people really, by the time you're 40 or 50, I think it weighs on you. And so my argument is you're going to end up working 80,000 hours in your life. Why not do what you love? And I fear that our society has been steering people towards, quote, safe jobs, which in a day of AI may not even be that safe anymore. And I would argue the safest thing you could possibly do is find a career in something that you're totally fascinated with. And the reason is all the techniques that tell you how to be the most successful thing you can possibly be, they're all 10 times easier if you're fascinated and in love with the subject matter. Everything gets easier and you get energy rather than it costing you.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining us today is Bill Gurley. The book is phenomenal. Running Down a Dream, How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love. Don't all of us want to do that. But Bill, I've been following your career from a distance. It's a real pleasure for me to have you on our podcast together. And I'm a big book lover, and this is going to be on my recommended list going forward for young and old people. There's so much in the book. I want to go to something that I love, which is getting a book published. So let's start right there. How does it feel to have this published now?
It's a bit overwhelming. This was a passion project on the side for me, not my day job. And it was born out of a presentation I gave 8 years ago at the University of Texas. And once it began to take life as a book, for reasons that we could dive into, I took it very seriously and did a ton of academic research, talked to a ton of experts. I really wanted it to be great. And so it took about 5 years, literally, not full time, like in the background to get it birthed. And then the thing I had no idea, promoting the book is quite tedious.
Yeah, it's hard. Now, listen, I've done a couple of books. It's hard. You got to get out there. You got to get your personality out there. But you're doing a hell of a job. You know, I've seen you on a couple of different podcasts. I've listened to you. I think the story about James Clear observing you when you were at the University of Texas at the McCombs.
Yeah, he found the video on the YouTube and reposted it, which gave me some confidence. You know, he's perhaps the best-selling author in the self-help categories there. Well, him and Mel Robbins.
Well, listen, he's written a phenomenal book about habits, but you have recognized something through pattern recognition. But there's also something else that you're doing, which is evident in your book. You have a tremendous amount of self-awareness, which is, if you don't mind me saying this, because I've worked on Wall Street for 40 years, venture capitalists and Wall Streeters typically don't have a lot of self-awareness, Bill Gurley, okay? So this is something that you have, which I give you an enormous amount of credit for. So tell us about your insights from your own self, and tell us how you saw these patterns. And that's why this is why the book is so good, by the way. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So there was a period in my life, I'm a big book fan as well, where I was reading a ton of biographies, and I finished this third biography and saw a through line between it and two others in completely different fields. And these were all people that started on the very bottom rung of the ladder, but had high intent. So they wanted to be successful in the category, starting at the very bottom. And I noticed that they all did very similar things. And some of these things are things that aren't generally recommended to young people. I think we also live in a world, at least in North America, where our path to and through college has gotten super intense, and kids are just way overscheduled. And they don't really have the opportunity. And others have written about this. Haidt's written about this. Rick Rubin's talked about it. They're so overscheduled that they just don't have the time to find what they love and to really fall in love with something that they can turn into a career. And so I wrote this book with just one objective in mind, which is to help unlock human potential. I want people to believe they can go do something that maybe their parents or some advisor told them not to, and have the motivation and the methods to go do it.
You know, you're an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur in my career, and so I've gotten some things right, Bill. I've gotten some things very wrong. I've had career setbacks. I infamously went into politics for a little while, got my ass fired after 11 days. So I've had my my bumps and scrapes along the way. But there's something that you write about in this book that I want you to address, because I do believe this, and this is something that you cite Daniel Pink's research in this about the regrets of inaction. So that's me. I feel like whatever's happened has happened. I'm willing to accept it, primarily because I've been on the playing field throwing interceptions and a few touchdowns. So talk about the regrets of inaction, as you beautifully write about it.
And you mentioned earlier, career regret. We did a survey first on SurveyMonkey, and then we did it again with Wharton People Analytics because we wanted to make sure we got it right, where we asked people that had been to college, if you could start your career over again, would you do it differently? And in our original SurveyMonkey, 7 out of 10 said yes. With Wharton, it was 6 out of 10. It's still a vast majority of people. Daniel Pink, in his book, The Power of Regrets, notes that humans dwell on regrets of inaction. He calls them boldness regrets. These are things you didn't try. And the older you get, the more they weigh on you. Humans are fabulous at forgiving themselves for mistakes, kind of what you just walked through. Those are action mistakes. We're like, oh, that's all right. Water under the bridge. I learned something, and you move on. But the thing you never tried is the thing that eats at you as you get old.
So young people listen to this podcast, and thank God for that. So I want you to grab the young men and women that listen to this, grab them by their shirt, grab them by the collar, and shake them a little right now, and give me the message, Bill.
Yeah. So first of all, we have a phrase in the book, life is a use it or lose it proposition. And I think young people don't see the end of times. Like, it seems very far away, but older people really, it weighs, by the time you're 40 or 50, I think it weighs on you. And so, my argument is you're going to end up working 80,000 hours in your life, and why not do what you love? And I fear that our society has been steering people towards, quote, safe jobs, which in a day of AI may not even be that safe anymore. And I would argue the safest thing you could possibly do is find a career in something that you're totally fascinated with. And the reason is all the techniques in the book that tell you how to be the most successful thing you can possibly be, they're all 10 times easier if you're fascinated and in love with the subject matter. Like, everything gets easier, and you get energy rather than it costing you energy. So, I would also tell them one last thing. I would just tell them, if you don't know what that is, that's completely fine. Don't stress out about it. Just keep trying things, take shots on goal, see what really interests you until you can find it. And the whole chapter in our book called Chase Your Curiosity is about that journey. So it doesn't presume you know this going in.
I mean, this is fascinating. The reason why I was going to step in is related to something that you write about, which is the ethos of the reality of most people can't afford to be wrong. And again, it's something to do with their self-image, but it could also be an economic reason. Somebody like me at the early part of my career, I didn't have the guts to start my own business. In fact, I wrote down the day I graduated from law school, Bill, I said, I'm going to have my own business, but not until I pay off all this school debt. It took me 7 years, and I worked at Goldman Sachs for 7 years. When the debt was paid off, I left and started my own business.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was scary even then without that financial rock or that boulder on my shoulder. So how do you get through that?
I think it's difficult. I would tell you that for your listeners, the book's divided into profiles and principles, and they interleave and alternate. And the profiles are stories. And a couple of the stories, people have $0 when they start. Certainly, the Bob Dylan's one of the stories. When he went to New York, he had $10.
It's a great, the Dylan story, which even though I saw the movie, I didn't really see in your context. We'll get to that.
They missed this part. Most of our coverage is pre the movie.
I love the Dylan story. I want to get to the Dylan story, but weave it in with this.
But Jen Atkins, I was going to say, Jen Atkins went to New York or LA with $200. Now your situation's worse because that is negative money, which is more of a handcuff. I would tell people, one thing they can do, and AI can be super helpful on this, is you can plan and imagine without actually doing something. So, and I think the more you do of that as an exercise, the more confidence you will build that you could possibly go in that direction. Dave Evans, who wrote Designing Your Life, talks about this as a way to find which way you want to go. He says like battle card 3 or 4 scenarios, but it sounded like you knew what you wanted to do. So literally as a hobby at home, like have AI help you build a game plan. Like what are the first 5 steps going to be? How can I do this with this constraint? And I'm not saying jump tomorrow, but I think the more that you visualize what's possible and think through the difficulties, the steps you would take, the more confidence you're going to have in taking that leap.
Yeah, I know this. I think it's really true, and I always tell young people that it's not as scary as it looks, and that's the weird thing about it. I remember when I left Goldman, one of the old partners at Goldman, still a very close friend of mine, he's in his 80s now. He says, you'll figure it out, and you know this expression, entrepreneurs, they jump off a cliff, they're trying to build an airplane on the way down, but you figure it out. And I think that's something that we need to tell young people, that believe in yourself, recognize that you have levels of resourcefulness and energy for the things you're passionate about, way more than the fears. The energy and passion can overcome the fears. Tell us about Bob Dylan, though, sir. I thought that was, to me, when I think of your book, I'm going to think of so many great ideas and concepts, but it's really the Bob Dylan story that resonates with me the most. Tell us about Bob Dylan.
So this isn't covered in the movie, and there is some detail in the Scorsese documentary, but Dylan is and always was, going way back to when he got started, is a historian. And he's insanely studious about music. And so when he got to Minneapolis, he started studying folk music. And I have a high confidence level based on what I've read that he knew more about folk music than anyone else in Minnesota when he left for New York. And the friends they talked to, he would sit in record stores that had these listening booths back then, and he just went over it and over it and over it. And now, obviously he's so successful, you can see this. He did a podcast for a while where he went through different genres of music, and you can just see how much detail's in his brain. And then he released this book, coffee table book, recently about the 50 most impactful songs of all time. And you just see that I think people have a perception that he's just sitting there writing his own songs, but the guy has just studied everyone under the sun. The second tenet in the book is hone your craft. It's all about continuous learning. And it's a vector that I see run through all the most successful people. Do you go home at night and study the thing you love? And does it feel like an alternative to watching Netflix?
Yeah. So, that's the follow-up question. Do you think the curiosity-driven path that he was on, that you wonderfully describe in this book, is harder in the attention economy, that rewards, it rewards breadth over depth, as an example? Potentially,
but I would tell you that a lot of people have brought up the threat of AI recently, and I realized I started writing this book way before the AI wave, but most of the people that are just hyper curious about their field, they act like artisans or craftsmen. And part of what's really cool about an artisan or a craftsman is they're really studying the nuance at the edge of the field. And that's the stuff that's not in the AI model. If you just go to school and learn all the rote stuff and you think you have a defensible, differentiation because of that, that's the stuff that AI can do really great. And the thing that the experts do, or these artisans do, is really study what's on the edge and the nuance that's out there. And they're able to use that confidence in the nuance to really differentiate themselves. So I'm certain that Mark Cuban had a great quote the other day. He said, there are 2 types of people in the world: those that use LLMs to learn faster and even more, and those that use LLMs to avoid learning. And I thought it was pretty profound. Like, if you want to be studious about something, there's never been a better time on the planet. Like these tools will allow you to learn as fast as you possibly want to go, but you have to have the interest. As you said, if you don't, you don't get there. But this goes back to the test being, are you fascinated with this? Like,
it's a good segue into what you talk about in terms of people wanting success or people just excited about building things, right? It's sort of the same sort of concept. So tell us about your observation as a venture capitalist of founders that you've met. You can tell early on, can't you, when someone's generally...
I mean, founders,
right?
Founders have two things that are, first of all, they just have a super high motor. They're very determined, at least the best one. They're like hyper determined. They're going to do this come hell or high water. But the second thing is they are hyper curious about what they're doing. And so almost the way that a founder or entrepreneur takes advantage of some new technology wave is they go understand what it's capable of more than anyone else. So just as I'm talking about, maybe Bob Dylan did in folk music, they're doing that with the new AI wave, and they did it with the mobile wave and the internet wave. These are the people that are on that edge, studying that nuance and exploiting it.
Yeah, I mean, see, to me, that's the real love, right? I like building things, and I have intellectual curiosity, and don't get me wrong, I'm in it for success. I'm not saying I'm not, but doesn't overly inspire me. What inspires me, and one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is that I love talking to authors. I mean, the fact that you took the time to synthesize and put all of these thoughts down for all of us. I used to tease people, Bill, you and I are roughly the same age. I used to say for $10, you can read in 10 hours, 10 years of an author's experience. Now with inflation, it's probably $30 today, but you get my point. And it's also about the peer group. I always tell my kids, you're the weighted average of the 5 people you hang out with. You write your theme about the power of peer groups and the people you surround yourself with. How much of long-term success is talent? And how much of it is just getting yourself into the right space and into the right peer group to help propel yourself?
Look, I think having written this book, I would hope one thing people will walk away from is the belief that the techniques that I have in here don't require some excessive amount of intellectual power or some natural talent to go do them. Most of the people in the book are hyper fascinated by their field. They study their butts off. And they collaborate and connect in multiple ways with both mentors and peers. And my favorite principle in the book is this one on peers, because I think a lot of people say what you just said, like being a good friend group, but I don't think they are taught to proactively create a peer group to help them along their career path. And we have some wonderful examples in the book, but I think too many people come out of the college experience sharp-elbowed, mainly because it's so competitive. Like, you're trying to get good grades, you're trying to get the job someone else couldn't get. But what I would tell people is the world's not zero-sum. In any field that we're in, there's many, many winners, many, many great winners. And if you can find a group of people that are on the same journey you are, they're on the same rung of the ladder climbing up, and you guys can share and trust one another, it is just so wonderful. You get so much extra horsepower. You get shared learning across the group. You get to share each other's networks. You get a support group on bad days, which is, there's a lot of them. And it's fantastic. And I think this is not, once again, this is a technique that's not taught a lot. I think this is maybe the first book that's really pounding the table on it. But it can be really powerful.
2 other themes, if you don't mind me going to these.
No, go
quickly.
for it.
Sam Hinkie, you give a great example of him. It's cautionary tale, but it's really about trusting the process. And let's go to McConaughey, who I think is a philosopher king. In addition to being, a great looking A-list actor, his depth and his insights, and I love his writing, by the way. And so, sounds like you guys are close. And he says something which we have to say to our kids every day, and even to ourselves: don't half-ass anything, right? I guess his dad said that to him. So take those 2 guys. Tell us a little bit about those 2 guys and the impact that they've had on you.
Yeah, so I've gotten to meet Matthew here in Austin, where I relocated a few years ago. His book Green Lights is oddly, I think, has a similar objective as my book, but comes from a very different place. He uses the metaphor of a green light to be know when you should put the gas pedal and run at things. And I thought it's funny. I got to meet Rick Rubin through this process, and his book, The Creative Act, is very different than my book, but I think it has the same goal, which is to encourage people to get out there and do their thing, and there's this great anecdote in Matthew's history where he had told his dad he was going to be a lawyer, and he was at the University of Texas pre-law track and met some people at the film school and had a change of heart. He wanted to go do this thing, and he was afraid to tell his father. But when he did, his father said, famously now, don't half-ass it. And he said it was the last thing he expected his father to say, and the best thing his father could have said, because it wasn't only encouragement, but it was responsibility. He called it rocket fuel. And that's kind of what I hope the book can do. The concluding chapter of the book's titled, It Ain't Easy. And I don't want anyone to think that, you can read this book and everything just comes at you. Everything's hard out there. But one of the reasons you want to be fascinated by what it is you're doing is so that you have the ability to go do all these pieces that bring it all together. And so, I think he's a great example of someone who's risen up, but also gives back. That's another principle we have in the book. I think his writing, is intended to help and motivate people. And, he's a great role model for a lot of the younger adults out there.
Yeah, listen, it's just such great messaging. It's a short, Bill, it's a lot of dense information in a short book. This book took me a few hours to read, and I was like, wow, this is great. And even you've got your book list in the back as well, which I tell people they should look through. And I've read some of these books, and now because of you, I'm going to read more of them. But if I said to you, I get a kid in front of you, and I said, okay, there's one thing that I would like you to do differently tomorrow. Okay, you just finished my book. They come and sit down, they're right there in your office. And you say, okay, there's one thing I'd like you to do differently tomorrow. What is that? What would that hope be for you, for that person?
Me, especially with the young adult, is just to start thinking about and contemplating what it is that they're truly fascinated with. Like that's the lane that if they can get in, I think they're going to have just a wonderfully fulfilling life. And one of the things that motivated me to write the book, Anthony, I'm fortunate enough that people that saw this video online many years ago, some of them shifted careers and have reached out to me and they're tickled pink. And like knowing that you had this chance to get people into that lane where they're just so happy and so fulfilled. A lot of the podcasters I've met are in that lane. They're thrilled to talk to people and be excited and learn all the time. And so it's doable. And there's a ton of examples in the book. I'm glad that it went fast for you. The way the stories were written were intended to make it super consumable.
No, listen, it was very consumable. I think, I think of my 26-year-old son who is he's a creative guy, want to be in the film industry. So, okay, he's in the film industry. He's produced 2 films. And he got the chance yesterday to tour George Lucas's new museum, I guess, of narrative art is what it's called. And
That's awesome.
In L.A. And he said to me, it was the greatest day of his life, Bill. Greatest day of his life. Okay.
How good is that?
And I want to share that with people because he is not following me in my career, nor did I ask him to. Yeah. This is something he really wants to do. And I always tell people that Mel Brooks is my spiritual advisor. I've never met Mel, but Mel Brooks at 99 has said, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. And I think that message in this book is so vivid,
And look, if a kid goes in a museum and it's the best day of their life, that is the right direction. Like,
Right.
because
Right.
most young people go in museums and don't have any positive experience whatsoever.
But I mean, look, he's walking around in the museum with one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and of course, Anthony, my son Anthony, wants to be a filmmaker, and George Lucas puts his
I
arm
get
around him
it.
and says, "I just want you to know, making films is very hard."
Yes.
Okay, but you know what? So is Wall Street, so is venture capital. But if you like it, you can take the body blows that happen.
Oh, it's so great.
When you're running down a dream, you're going to get your ass kicked a few times. And that's the big message of this book. And I got to tell you, I was inspired by the book, and I'm grateful to you for writing it. And thank you for coming on the show. So we're down to the 5 words. Okay. So if you ever listen to my podcast, my producer and I come
By
up
the way,
with 5
Anthony, just
words.
real quick, especially if you're going to have some listeners who are audio only. When you were telling me that story about your son in the museum, and I had a huge smile on my face, because that type of fascination is exactly like now that I've talked to so many young people, that's exactly what you're looking for. When you can see that and then blow more wind behind his sails, like, that's just so great. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, well, 100%. But that's why I brought it up, because it's elements of that is right here in your book. So, all right. So we have 5 words, Bill. I'm going to say the word, a little bit of a Rorschach test. You give me a sentence or two. Okay.
All right.
And we more or less pull these words from your book. So if I say the word regret, you say.
Does it have to be a single word?
No.
I just avoidable.
Stream of consciousness.
It's avoidable.
Your head.
It's avoidable. Like, start to read my book, first of all, but start to think about how you can do that thing that's weighing on you. I think you can. I think the tools have never been better. Like the methodology in my book, the AI tools that are out there for learning and connecting have never been. This is the best time in the history of the world to go chase your dreams.
Yeah, so fascinating, because when you say the word regret, or I say the word regret, I think inaction leads to regret.
Yeah.
I feel like, I've done some things well and some things not so well, but at least I'm acting.
Yeah.
So get in there, start acting. I say the word dream, Bill. You say what?
Like possibilities. I go back to this word fascination, which I actually borrowed from Jerry Seinfeld. But like, if you are just hyper fascinated by something, I want anyone out there to contemplate and likely and hopefully believe that they actually can do it in a career. All
right. I love that, and that's the whole reason, the whole synthesis of the book. What about passion? I say the word passion.
The word has become a bit of a cliche because people say it so much with a career, and that's why I tried to use the word curiosity, or the Seinfeld word fascination. Like, the real question is, are you curious about it to a level where you study the history, like want to understand the nuance, study all the greats? Do you naturally want to study the greats like your son does with George Lucas? If you do, I think you're pointed in the right direction. That may not be passion. Like, it requires more than that.
Silicon Valley.
Special place, man. Special place. There's a chapter in the book we didn't talk about. It's titled "Go to the Epicenter," and there are a few industries where there is a geographic nexus, and if you get to that place, you will discover that lots of the parts that are highlighted in my book accelerate, and you should be unfearful of that step. If you know you're pointing in the right direction, you should want to get to that place as fast as possible.
So it's interesting because look, I've been out in Silicon Valley a lot, but it's not my place. Wall Street and the financial center of New York has been more my place. But what I would say about Silicon Valley, for me, I'd like Silicon Valley to stay Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
We got to get the right policies, and we got to get the right, ideas around government, so that we don't have everybody leaving Silicon Valley and turning it into Austin. That would be my recommendation. Okay. Last 2 words, and I'll give you the last word. Okay. Bill Gurley.
Well, I mean, that's a hard thing to talk about yourself. My story is embedded at the back of the book in the epilogue, and my version of my story. And I feel very fortunate to have found my way to my dream job. It took 2 stops along the way that I think were building blocks. They weren't wasteful. I was an engineer for just over 2 years, and then I worked on Wall Street for 4 years. But I found the way to my place. And so I feel very fortunate to have had that experience. At this point in my life, I'd like to give back. I'd like to be impactful. This book is the first step in that journey. And, that's where I'd leave it.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on. The title of the book is Running Down a Dream. It's a great cover, by the way. How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love by Bill Gurley. Thank you so much for joining us today on Open Book.
Thanks for having me.
I think a lot of people were scared to talk before because they thought any information we give, it's only going to help Trump. It was in their self-interest to convince themselves to say he could do this.
I did not realize how bad it was until I finished your book.
A small group around Biden basically would say, oh, come and brief us, and then we will brief him. And what one cabinet member said to us is, yes, the president is technically making decisions, but if they're being presented in a certain way, it's actually not really a decision.
If I say to Alex, Anthony can have anything he wants for dinner, and Alex goes to you and says, you can have chicken or you can have fish. Well, technically, you've made a decision when you pick the chicken, but the limitations of the decision-making process really belie that this is any sort of real process. And that's a real problem.
On and on, you could see how people would try to rationalize putting a guy that could not do the job he was running for in the Oval Office.
A famous author said, if there's a book that you want to read that hasn't been written, then you must write it yourself. And that's what we did.
2 friends, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. Jake is the lead DC anchor, chief Washington correspondent for CNN, and Alex Thompson is the national political correspondent for Axios. The title of this best-selling book is Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. And I have to say this, and this is something that Jake will enjoy. I texted Jake from one of my other phones. He didn't know who the hell it was. And so he made me send him a FaceTime video to verify that it was actually me, Alex. But I read the book. You guys sent me an advance copy. I don't have it on me, actually, because I left it in London for one of my colleagues from Goalhanger, this podcast company I do a podcast with. But I read the book, and I would say that my mouth was open for most of the book in terms of the revelations in the book. I texted Jake and he didn't believe it was me, so I had to FaceTime him. But what I said at the time was this is as big of a deal as Watergate to somebody like me. Hey everyone, it's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show. And I've seen a lot of your interviews, and people have brought this up to the two of you. So I want to start by congratulating you for the book, but also why write it? Because of course you're getting the back flack of a tremendous amount of controversy. You're 2 smart guys. You knew that this would be a hotbed issue for a lot of people, and they would start shooting at you and dehumanizing you. You're smarter than me, okay? When I went into politics, I was stupider than the 2 of you, okay? I didn't realize the vortex I was going into, but you guys did. So let's start there. Why write the book knowing that?
Well, the book was written just because I wanted to know what happened. I was very confused. I knew he'd been aging and we'd been watching him deteriorate over time. But then that night of the debate, June 27th, 2024, I was shocked. I mean, again, we'd all seen him declining and getting older, but that was something, what we saw that night was something else. It was someone who couldn't articulate a thought, somebody who lost his train of thought, somebody who couldn't come up with words. And I wanted to know what happened. And that really was the impetus for it. And the day before the election, Alex was on my show, and I very impulsively just told him about the book idea. I thought Harris was not going to win, and that a lot of Democrats thought the original sin of this all was Biden deciding to run for re-election. And then I don't know how seriously he took what I said, but the day after the election, I reached out and we got to work, and we were just reporting. And we were reporting before we had a deal. We were reporting before we had a publisher. We just wanted to know. I mean, I do remember saying to Alex early on, like, if we just post this, if nobody buys this, and this is just you and me and self-publishing an ebook, that's fine with me. I don't care. I just want to know what happened. And so that was the impetus for it. And you know, there is a lot of blowback on the right and the left. I will say that the book is a hit with the normies, which thankfully is most of the country. I mean, we are selling very well, and the reviews have been great from most sane publications. But yeah, I mean, that was it. Why? How bad was he before the debate? How often did it rear its head? Who saw it? How many people saw it? And we didn't even know how much we would get, honestly, when we started writing the book, even after we had the contract. And by the end of it, we were pleased with how many people talked to us. More than 200 people, almost all of them Democrats, almost all of the interviews after the election. So, you know, I think it was, I forget who said it. But a famous author said, you know, if there's a book that you want to read that hasn't been written, then you must write it yourself. And that's what we did.
Well, I mean, I'll let Alex talk in a second, but Jake, when I read the book, I literally texted you when I closed the book. And I said, okay, this book, see, the thing is, you know this, and I know this because I've written books, and I got a lot of books in my office, and I do a podcast on books. A lot of people don't read the books. They just, you know, they read somebody's rendition of the book. They don't even know what's in the book. The research in this book is overwhelming. It's not like, oh, Jake and Alex made something up. You have originally sourced research in the book. So Alex, talk a little bit about that. How did you get that, by the way? I would love to know that. And then secondarily, are you surprised by the reaction of people? Because Jake's saying something about the normies. These people are going to shit on the book one way or another for partisan reasons, but the book is an overwhelming, clear-eyed, well-researched indictment of what happened.
Yeah, one of my former bosses once said the only thing worse than everybody talking about your reporting is nobody talking about your reporting. In that it's not fun. Like when everyone is talking about it, but that is the goal. And the reason why people are talking about it is because each side has a vested interest in their narrative prevailing. Democrats don't want to look in the someone that covered Joe Biden for 4 years, and was, I thought, tough but fair. But what about Trump was the answer for everything. And so I'm not surprised at all that their answer still is, what about Trump? But I will say, like, even not just the normies, but also I think people in the Biden administration, on the Biden campaign team, and Democrats, I've been at least somewhat hardened for the number of people I personally know that have read the book and are willing to, accept reality in a way that I think they weren't a year ago. And as for, how we did it, we basically did nothing for 2.5 months. I would say the other thing that was going in our favor is that people that we had been trying to reach out to, cold calling, sliding into their DMs, for years, finally were willing to talk, because I think both because some of them were being reflective, not all, but some of them were, and figuring out how they got here. And then also, there was no, I think a lot of people were scared to talk before because they thought any information we give, it's only going to help Trump. And so I think that just changed things.
So, the three of us are students of history. We know that this has happened before, right? We know the Woodrow and Edith Wilson situation. We know that heart attacks that Eisenhower had and things that were going on with Ronald Reagan. But this feels so different from that. So make a historical comparison for me. Tell me why you guys think this is different, and tell me what you think the lasting implications are of this.
It's tough to assess the best historical reference, just because we still don't know so much about how addled President Reagan was at the very end of his second term with Alzheimer's, or the depths of Eisenhower's worst days after his heart attacks. I think the best historical reference would probably be something in between Ronald Reagan and, it's certainly not like Woodrow Wilson's stroke, but it's up there. I mean, it is very clear, and I don't even think that they're refuting it or rebutting it, but it is very clear that the construct Alex and I came up with is a fine or good Biden and a non-functioning Biden. And we're not saying that non-functioning Biden is 100% of Biden. I mean, that's just not the case. Obviously, we see him walking and talking and making remarks, and we saw that throughout his presidency. But as with anybody who is aging or has some sort of degenerative issue cognitively, there are good days and bad days, good moments and bad moments. And we are saying that there were the non-functioning Biden that we saw the night of the debate, that there were more moments like that than the public was aware of behind the scenes. So I suppose it's most like Reagan, if I suss it out, because Reagan certainly had moments where he was functioning and non-functioning. But I'm not a doctor, and I didn't have any special insight into the Reagan administration. But if I had to come up with a comparison, I guess that's the one. What's so outrageous about it to me is the fact that we as a public, and well, look, I mean, Anthony, you went out on a limb. You endorsed Biden, right? And then you were a former Trump official who endorsed Biden. And you had every right to, as somebody publicly advocating for him, you had every right to know what was going on behind the scenes. And they were hiding it from you. And they were hiding it from, cabinet secretaries and top Democratic officials and donors and such, until they could no longer hide it, until the debate revealed it. So
let me just say a couple of things here. I want you both to react. So I gave money to the Biden people. They came to my office. They told me that some of this stuff is AI generated. The stuff on Normandy, he was really looking over here. He wasn't looking over there. Remember, Macron was trying to help him get out of the pew. They told me that he broke his foot. They didn't put the cast on properly, which is why he was hobbling around like that. But he was as energetic as ever. And that don't look at this thing going on over here, but look at that thing over there, sort of Wizard of Ozzy. The one thing I will say to you, Jake, I gave $30,000 to go to this East Hampton fundraiser after the debate. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I went to there, and I did say to a reporter afterwards, he was behind a velvet rope. He was with the prompter in front of him. I've been to a lot of political fundraisers. I've never seen somebody do that before, where no interaction with the people at the fundraiser, a couple of pictures for top donors, and then reading from the prompter. Yeah. After the guys, I walked out of there, said, okay, there's no way this guy's going to make it to the end. You're not going to be able to make it. And I guess my reaction was similar to your reaction, but I did not realize how bad it was until I finished your book. So let me say a couple of things. I'd like you to respond to them. Okay. Was there a group of people that just said to themselves, hey, we've got great power here? And Jake, you said this on one of your shows, by the way, and I'm going to bring it up here. I don't know if you remember saying it, but I've used it on my podcast. There was very little turnover in the Biden administration, if any. And it was almost like they had their own power structures where they didn't need to, Biden wasn't overseeing it. It's usually, not Trumpian turnover, but there's usually some turnover. That's the president's like, okay, I don't like what you're doing. I got to move you out. Yep. But these guys had their own power structures, no turnover. And they're like, if we can just get the old man to get through one more election, we can keep these power structures. What's your reaction to that, Jake? And Alex?
Alex, why don't you take it?
I think there is something to, I would say that there were two rationales for one is a little bit more sympathetic, and one is closer to what you're doing. And honestly, people in the administration still debate which one was true. And it's probably a combination. It was in their self-interest to convince themselves to say he could do this. But so the more sympathetic one is, Joe Biden is the only person that's beaten Trump. They believed that he was the only one that could beat Trump or had the best chance of beating Trump. Trump is an existential threat to democracy, and therefore you can justify anything. The less sympathetic one is what you're saying, is that all of these people's lives, they're basically the first line of their obituaries are caught up in this guy. They believe that they, through Biden, are helping save the country. And, and they also had like little things like Mike Donilon was making $4 million off the reelection campaign. Steve Ricchetti, another top aide, had a lifelong ambition of being White House chief of staff. And on you could see how people would try to rationalize, putting a guy that could not do the job he was running for in the Oval Office.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think you're onto something there, Anthony, in the sense that I don't think President Biden fired one person. I can't think of any.
No, you said it on your show. It was to me, it was an epiphany. I was like, I've used it. I said, there's proof that he wasn't in charge. He didn't fire anybody.
Didn't fire one person, including after the Afghanistan debacle, and including after Secretary Lloyd Austin deceived the country and the White House about his medical issues. And it's truly shocking. One of the things that one of the moments in the book that is the most meaningful to me takes place in June 2024 when Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado goes to the White House for an immigration event. And Biden has some weird moment speaking. It's an event that neurologists tell us seemed neurological. He says something, nobody can hear him. It's very odd. It's a very odd moment. You can Google it and see it. But it's disconcerting. And Bennett leaves the White House thinking, well, no wonder our immigration policy is such a mess. This guy can't manage the brief. He's not in charge. He's not handling it. And so all these competing groups and staffers are in charge of it. And that's why the immigration policy is all over the map. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas expected early on in the Biden administration to get an order that would give him the power to help provide more border security. And it never came. So when the Biden people said, well, okay, regardless of this book, we're still waiting for the authors to provide one decision that, mishandled national security or whatever. There's a million of them. It's just that the absence of leadership is also a decision. Well, and that's one of the issues.
That was one of my questions. And so I want you to each channel your Richard Neustadt for a second, the very famous author of Presidential Power, because you write in the book that there was an insider describing kind of a 5-person board, if you will, which is what you're talking about right now. And what you learn from Neustadt, you actually do need one person to come up and make the decision. They can either generate it from the White House or have it be a cabinet model, but there's got to be one conductor. And so just talk about that. Channel your Richard Neustadt for a second. Be a historian to speak to a future generation to say this historically means what for future presidents.
I think if you look at how this White House operated, because Biden was limited in his energy, because Biden was limited in the amount of time he could be engaged, what you saw was that power and decision-making trickled down. And yes, we don't have any reporting that they made a decision, without having Biden sign off. But what a cabinet member said is that they couldn't get any, especially by 2023, 2024, they couldn't get any time with him. And that small group around Biden basically would say, oh, come and brief us, and then we will brief him. And what one cabinet member said to us is, yes, the president is technically making the decisions, But if they're being presented in a certain way, it's actually not really a decision. And I think what you saw here is that so much of the decision making was made, and by that I mean like the haggling over how to present a decision was done at the mid level, and as a result, there was at times there was no coherence of a larger strategy because the president was not involved until the very, very end, when basically the decision and all the politicking had already been made. So I think it shows how sort of things can run in like an incoherent autopilot without, really tremendous engagement, or at least a very clear direction set from the top. I mean, the most coherent strategy they probably had was on Ukraine. And that was because Joe Biden, even if and I do think he was more engaged on that issue than general, but also he set a very clear direction of what he wanted. And so the bureaucracy was all swimming in a largely the same direction.
Although, I mean, even then, there were a lot of criticisms from Ukraine hawks, Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill, who thought that Biden was slow walking a lot of these decisions, who he would get to where they wanted him to be ultimately in giving the Ukrainians ATACMS or whatever. But it took a while. Now, we don't have any reporting that suggests that's because he was not engaged or he was addled. And certainly there's even an argument to be made that like he had to bring Europe along on some of these decisions. And he was, that was something that he had to manage. But also, like, I don't know. I mean, and the truth is a lot of people don't know because, there was a meeting that President Biden had with the House Democrats in October 2021. He was supposed to go before them. This is in the book. And he's supposed to say, I want you to separate the Build Back Better bill from the infrastructure bill. Vote for infrastructure, and then we'll keep working on Build Back Better. That was what he was supposed to say. That's what Nancy Pelosi thought he was going to say. He doesn't say it. And then they bring him back again. He doesn't say it again. Now, at the time, a lot of people thought, this is weird. He's being cagey. Maybe he's just being political. But then in retrospect, after the debate, a lot of House Democrats looked back on that and thought, oh, something was going on there. He just didn't have a handle on all this. One other thing on the point that Alex was making about if cabinet secretaries or others brought decisions to the Politburo, which is what the Biden administration officials called this tight inner circle, the Politburo, Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donilon, et cetera. And the quote that Alex referred to, like, if somebody else is managing the decision making, how much of a decision it is. Just to give a kind of like a sillier metaphor, so for your viewers or your listeners to understand, if I say to Alex, Anthony can have anything he wants for dinner. So, he's coming over tonight. Anthony can have anything he wants for dinner. And Alex goes to you and says, you can have chicken or you can have fish. Well, technically, you've made a decision when you pick the chicken, I assume. But the limitations of the decision-making process really belie that this is any sort of real process. And that's a real problem, which is not to say that, there isn't a form of that for any president, but it was just like on steroids for this one.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the problem is, I feel, hear me out for a second, guys, and respond. I feel like the Democrats got so intimidated or freaked out by Trump that they just said, we're going with Biden. He could be weekend at Biden's. We don't give a shit. We're going with Biden. And I think that the process, I mean, they are supposedly for the democracy. They don't have a New Hampshire primary. I can't remember the name of the House of Representative guy that was trying to run against Biden.
Pete Phillips.
Yeah. They disintegrated him. They went after Bobby Kennedy. I mean, they just, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if they had just let the process go, or if somebody had gone to Biden and said, dude, you're not able to do the job anymore. Let's get somebody in your place. I mean, they force him out anyway, guys, right? They force him out. They just happened to force him out in July as opposed to September of 23. I'm just wondering,
But they forced him out. Let's not give the Democrats too much credit. They forced him out because they thought they were going to lose the election, not because they had serious issues about whether or not he could be president, which they should have. And in fact, there's only one House Democrat that says the honest thing, which is not only should he not be our nominee, he shouldn't be president right now. And that's Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Washington State. But J.D. Vance says the same thing. And it's really honestly hard to argue. How can you say he's too addled to be our nominee, but he still can be president? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. We had cabinet secretaries telling us that by 2024, President Biden could not be relied upon for that proverbial 2 a.m. in the middle of the night national security emergency phone call.
So play Washington cynic for me for a second. Okay,
that will be easy.
Yes, I understand that. I understand that. But this is the thing. Like, to me, I read the book and I'm like, if I'm a Democrat, I would say, okay, guys, this is a cautionary tale for what can happen if you don't answer the call of duty necessary, if you don't fulfill your obligation about competence. I would be praising the two of you guys. I would be like, guys, this is a wake-up call. We got to go back to the woodshed together, and we have to reorganize ourselves because this is a wake-up call.
Because you
don't do that.
Because you're not a partisan Democrat. You're a normie. I mean, which is
they go after the two of you, and they're lighting you guys up on Twitter or lighting you guys up on Bill, whatever. They're lighting you up everywhere. But I mean, don't you get? I mean, I guess my point is, what would wake them up, Jake? What would wake them up, Alex?
I mean, what will wake them up? I mean, like all politicians, what will wake them up is voters. Right? If enough normie voters say, hey, this was not okay, you guys were part of this. And, you know, we're seeing, it'll be interesting to see in the Virginia governor's race, the Republican already put up an ad against the Democrat, basically calling her complicit and, you know, vouching for Biden. You're seeing Antonia Villaraigosa in the California gubernatorial primary attack Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra, who are both obviously part of the administration, for not telling the truth about Biden. And we'll see how voters respond. But, you know, Jake has this comparison where, you know, it reminds him, and it's a good comparison, of Republicans after January 6th. And eventually, I think Republicans at first were, what are we going to do? And then voters weren't punishing them for it. In fact, voters were punishing them if they kept focusing on it. The Liz Cheney's and Adam Kinzinger. So, you know, I think, you know, it's really, unfortunately, politicians just seem to, they're not principled except for what's going to get me votes.
Yeah. We all know that, but I get, you know, the thing that blows me away is we're now at the point in history where the three of us read Orwell as a cautionary tale, but the other people read it as a fucking guidebook. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, this is how we're going to do things. Okay, we're going to just create the permanent lies. Is there any way to break that fever is, I guess, the question I have. I
mean, I'm not a partisan Democrat and I'm not a partisan Republican, and I don't really understand partisanship, particularly because it just seems so intellectually dishonest, especially this day and age when you have to stand by people and stand by actions that are just so horrifying for both Democrats and Republicans. I will say that it seemed there was a time, like maybe even like a week ago, where I thought, all right, well, Democrats, you know, at the very beginning, after this book came out, and the book did, you know, not to toot our own horn, but it did change the discussion and the dialogue about Biden without question. There was this front page story about our book on the Washington Post a week before the book was published.
Well, the book blew me away. I want to get to my last question here in a second, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
So there was a time when I thought, you know, the Democrats are going to have to come to terms with this. And, you know, Ro Khanna came out and started talking a little bit about this. Senator Chris Murphy came out and said, obviously, Biden had some cognitive decline. The question is how much. And I thought, okay, good. We're going to have an honest conversation about this. But that was it, pretty much. I mean, other than the political attacks Alex referred to, I haven't really seen, you know, we've seen Senator Warnock was asked about this by Kristen Welker on NBC. And he ran away from the question. Last I checked, November 2024 was in the past or something. Schumer tried to change it to we're looking at the future. Hakeem Jeffrey says we're looking at the future. I don't understand it, because to me, Democratic voters were there long before the party was, or even many in the news media, which is Biden's too old and can't do this job. So I don't fully understand the notion that people are not seizing this opportunity and saying, we need to acknowledge wrongdoing. Oh, Seth Moulton said something on Real Time.
Yeah, I saw you on the
said
show.
We need to acknowledge to voters that we were not telling the truth about the economy, about immigration, and about Biden's acuity. And I thought, wow, okay, maybe we're going to get somewhere. But the far left attacks that you see on me and Alex, like, that's, that's fine with us. We don't care. We're reporters. But that is what Democratic politicians have to deal with. They need their votes. Right. They can't have those people opposing them. And so that's the challenge here, is to reach those people and say, this was a fraud perpetrated on you. You guys are the victims of this. The old granny writing a $10 check to the Biden campaign and, finds out that Mike Donilon took $4 million. I mean, those people should be outraged.
It's so well said. So, okay. So at the end of my podcast, what we do, guys, is I come up with 5 words from the book. And so I'm going to ask you guys to each respond to it. You can give me a sentence, a word. I'm going to say a word. I want you to react to it. I'm going to say the word denial. So let's start with you, Alex. I say the word denial. What do you think of?
The family.
Okay. Jake?
The party, the Democratic Party, in huge denial about what was going on, and not inquisitive particularly.
How about 2024? How would you define that, Alex?
Democrats essentially forfeited and let Trump come back.
For Democrats, disaster. Yeah. So, when I think specifically about the debate, during this book tour, it's been wild to, we'll do some interviews and people will play the clips from the debate, and it's still just so painful to listen to those clips.
Trump.
Luckiest man in American history.
Okay, I'm with you, Alex. Do you want to add anything to that, Jake?
Victorious. That's what he is, and Democrats are responsible for it. Polling indicated that there was an opening for Donald Trump to not win. He did not ride this wasn't like an 80% approval. People loved and had fond memories of him. Democrats, as Alex said, forfeited.
Vice President Harris.
Loyal to a fault.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mixed. Our book is not an indictment of her. I think that she helped the party a lot get out of the basement they were in, and because of her, election night was not as huge of a disaster as it would have been if Biden had still been the nominee. But, she played a role in all this too.
So, my thing with her, I would just say cautious. If you're going to be president, you got to throw the ball. You got to take risks. And she was a little bit too cautious. She had 107 days. She should have just gone crazy, All right, last one. Okay. Joe Biden.
Tragic.
Yeah, you see guys say that. It's like a Greek tragedy. What about you, Jake?
Sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a way, it's a very, a great career politician. What a sad way to go out, but very Shakespearean, right? You're holding on way longer than you need to. And, listen, I thought the book was extraordinary. The title of the book is Original Sin. President Biden's declined its cover-up and his disastrous choice to run again. But I believe that this book will be a seminal book, you've made a historic contribution to not just today's zeitgeist, but also the future about how people are going to think about these things and what their obligations are. And I hope that's the outcome of this book, guys. I think it was an incredible book. And so I congratulate you guys on writing it, and thank you for joining me today on Open Book.
It's always
Thanks
good
for having us,
Anthony. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here that you might like.